So bonds are going up, bonds are rallying, equity markets are rallying, gold is looking good, the dollar is looking good, everything is going up. What's the risk?
There is no risk. That's one of the things we've been discussing. If risk is everywhere, risk is nowhere. If macro is the most important issue, then it's the least important issue. In other words, what the market is saying is that capital market cycles and economic cycles no longer really exist. Certainly not the way we were thinking about them 10, 20, or 30 years ago. And that is due to a couple of things. Number one, massive excess capital. So in other words, we're no longer in constrained capital environment. Number two, you've got an incredible ability to reprice things very, very quickly. And number three, central banks rolling out policy at a moment's notice. They really don't take weeks or months to decide. It's basically usually done over the weekend, and the problem goes away. So one thing we have is that clearly capital markets do not work the way they're supposed to. The other thing is, of course, economic cycles themselves no longer work the way they're supposed to either. That's why everybody was expecting recession, and then recession didn't come. So we're compressing the economic cycle, so to speak, more and more. So if you don't have the capital market cycles, and if you don't have economic cycles, then the risks must be outside the system. In other words, the risk migrates out of the screens into politics, electoral outcomes, into geopolitics, climate. They're migrating to shocks to the system.
So Victor,
but the ability to forecast shocks is very difficult.
Hold it right there. So you're saying geopolitics is a risk factor to consider, and politics is a risk factor to consider. If the Indian election is anything to go by, as an example, then the market has very quickly moved beyond a verdict which was not pretty much anticipated, was not anticipated at all, was really contrarian, so to speak. And even in terms of geopolitics, the tariff threat has really not impacted markets. So it seems like the markets are overlooking all possible risks out there. And I worry whether at the end of the year, with the US election cycle as well, we have an election cycle coming up in the UK, these anti-incumbency waves would have anything to do to impact the market. So is this a secular run, is what I'm trying to understand?
Well, it's basically an asset Goldilocks, as long as you don't have dramatic shock to the system. So, for example, Indian election was unexpected, but most people concluded that weaker BJP actually might be overall better for longer-term development of India. In Europe, at this stage, the jury is still out. And in the US, most people do not, at this stage, make a judgment as to exactly what's going to transpire in November, December of this year, in January of next year. So what you need the bigger shocks to the system, as I said, either from politics, geopolitics, climate, or something else. And that's what Jerome Powell and many other people are discussing, essentially saying that they do not believe that inflation or neutral rates will ever be in a narrow band again. And the reason it won't be in a narrow band again is because we don't have capital market cycles, we don't have economic cycles, and most of the risks lie outside the screen. And when those risks arrive, there could be very significant dislocation.
Victor, if you're buying everything, what are you selling? Because this market is always a two-way street, right? So if somebody's buying, somebody's got to be selling. And so what are investors selling?
Yeah. I can tell you what I don't like. I don't like anything to do with cyclicality, because I don't really buy that there are capital market cycles or economic cycles anymore. If you don't have cycles, then you can't say that at this point in the cycle, this is what you should do. At another point of the cycle, that's what you should do. I think that's pretty much dead. So anything to do with pure cyclicality and pure value, I don't believe that will perform. Everything else, there is actually opportunities across the board, across almost every industry that I look at.